Many years ago, former First Lady of the United States, Hillary Clinton, she was that among many other things, made famous an old African proverb: "It takes a village to raise a child." The phrase has long since become part of popular culture, and many of us, myself included, will often use the shorthand version, "It takes a village," whenever we encounter an obstacle that could not have been overcome without the help of others. I thought about that phrase again and again this past week as I drove around Vancouver and Richmond and the North Shore, delivering Passover kits to more than a dozen households in our congregation. Many of these deliveries were to our elders and those that have been homebound, not merely because of the pandemic, but also because of health and mobility issues that preceded the pandemic and maybe have been exacerbated by the pandemic. I had not seen any of these people, any of them in person in almost a year. In a few cases, I hadn't seen them in person in more than a year. And it was so good to visit with them for a few minutes, socially distanced on their front porch or in the doorway of their home. But it was also really hard. It was really hard to hear face to face how lonely and isolated so many have felt, the experience they've had during this pandemic. The stories were so often familiar to each other. Adult children and grandchildren unable to come into their homes because of worries about COVID transmission, or because they live out of province or out of country and can't visit like they used to. I also heard how much they missed synagogue and the socialization and connection that attending services, or even committee meetings for that matter, always gave them. There's an old joke, made older because I think I've told it to you more than once, about Schwartz and Goldberg going to shul. The rabbi is surprised to see Goldberg attending Shabbat services every week. Schwartz, he thinks he understands why. Schwartz's father was a cantor, he grew up in a religious home, but Goldberg, the man, never used to come to shul except maybe on the high holy days, and then he would sit in the back and would leave early. The rabbi asked them one day why all of a sudden they were coming together and so regularly to Shabbos services. Goldberg, the previously twice-a-year Jew, explained, "Well, Rabbi, Schwartz likes to come to talk to God. I like to come to talk to Schwartz." There is so much more to synagogue, of course, than prayer. Our services have long been just the medium, the excuse really, for people to see their friends, to get a little nosh, to fill their day with something other than TV, cooking, and housekeeping. And so I hear that as I stand on the porch. I hear how people miss the people of synagogue. Prayer they can get online like we're doing right now, but people, human beings, face to face, panim al panim, that is irreplaceable. But then I heard something else that fills me up and enabled me to ultimately leave that Passover box on their door with at least a little bit of degree of diminished worry. Every single one of the people that I visited, those that were alone and isolated, none were truly alone. They all had a neighbor, a friend, a member of the temple that would check in on them, bring up their mail, offer to pick up groceries, take down their recycling. Many of them, as I spoke earlier, had helping angels, angels who were friends from synagogue, and others, neighbors who had lived next to them for years and years. But now, since everybody was home all the time, proximity was a blessing. Judaism is the only religion I know of where holiness is not found alone on a mountaintop, but in the presence of other people. The whole idea that when we say Kaddish, the time when we feel most alone and most estranged, because literally the person who made our world complete, our spouse, our parent, a sibling, a friend, God forbid, a child, when they are gone, in that moment of crisis, we want to curl up in a ball, shut out the lights, the blinds, the doors, the world. And Judaism says, no, you need to go find a minyan. You need to find a community. You need to have people over to your house for Shiva, because God is found between us. My teacher, Rabbi Harold Schulweis of blessed memory, captured this in a poem that has stayed with me and in my files forever. The poem begins, "Where? God is not in me, nor in you, but between us. God is not me or mine, nor you or yours, but ours. God is not known, not alone, but in relationship. not as a separate lonely power, but revealed through our kinship, our friendship, through our healing and binding and raising up of each other. To know God is to know others. To love God is to love others. To hear God is to hear others. More than meditations within, more than insights within, more than feelings within. Between us are claims, obligations, commandments, to act, to do, to behave our beliefs. I seek God not as if he were a person alone, he or she, a process, a power, a being, a thing. I seek God not as if I were alone, a thinker, a mediator, a discrete entity. I seek God in connection, in the nexus of community. I pray and celebrate the betweenness that binds and holds together. Even alone, I am sustained by my memory of betweenness. I love that last line. I love the whole thing. Even alone, I am sustained by my memory of betweenness. Passover, Pesach, is a time of memory and remembering. Things and events that happened to generations we know only through story and folklore, but whose experience is as relevant to us today as it was to them in their time. Tonight, this week, we remember the world as it once was. We remember our betweenness, gathering at synagogue, sharing a row together in the sanctuary, hugs and handshakes, standing around the table, sampling oneg cookies, tearing challah. We remember visits to each other's homes and going out to lunch together, taking walks and just sitting with children and grandchildren on the living room sofa, complaining about what seems now to be such trivial things. The memory of those moments, the certainty, like that of the ancient Israelites, that redemption will come, that we will share them again. It is our greatest strength as a Jewish people and as human beings. Yes, it takes a village to raise a child, and that's a wonderful thing. But the more wonderful thing, the most wonderful thing, the most powerful thing, the most enduring thing is the village itself. We are the village. And no, I'm not going to call us the village people. And together, we are getting through this. That which is between us, that which binds us and obligates us to each other. That is holy. That is the place and the face of God. Shabbat Shalom.